back. Just a veterineer, just doing some video blogs of my time in the military really, and we kind of initially talked about before when I was in Depot Training Centre, Rousselon Barracks in Chichester. I joined the Royal Military Police at the tender age of 17, and I went through training, and training, to be fair, was, well, it was an eye-opener, and it certainly turned me from a boy to a man in terms of fitness, discipline, and all those other things that the military gives you. Values and standards. Well, I kind of had values and standards anyway, but you know what I mean. So I went to my first unit, which is in Hohne Germany, a place called Niedersachsen, I think it is. Near, if you're familiar with Hanover or Hamburg, not a million miles away from either of those two. It was a busy place. Now, what you've got to understand is, as military police in Germany at that time, because of something called the Status of Forces Agreement, SOFA, we had more or less the powers of a constable on the public highway and in public places. Now, some cowboys and some solicitors will say to you, or barrack room solicitors will say to you, yeah, but you're useless off camp. And that's due to legislation. A lot of legislation refers to a public place, and army camps can't really be defined as a public place because the public don't really have access to it. It's a restricted access area. So a lot of legislation requires public place, or has the word public place in it, like carrying an offensive weapon in a public place. Now, a lot of soldiers used to think that we were useless off camp. And the truth be known, in Germany, we were more effective off camp. On camp, we could only deal with what's called standing orders offences. So something that's been written by the commanding officer or the garrison commander on what you can and can't do. And of course, if you contravene them, then it's more or less a slapped wrist, dealt with summarily, slapped wrist. But off camp, then we could use legislation, law. For instance, we could use the Road Traffic Act for drink driving. We could use anything else that mentions a public place. So because of the Status of Forces Agreement, we were policing the force, and the force comprised of military personnel, their dependents, so husbands, wives, children, and United Kingdom-based civilians, things like civilian doctors, civilian support staff, all that sort of stuff, who had UKBC status. We covered them all, and at one point, when I was in Germany, we had 56,000 people in Germany. It was an awful lot of people. So in our garrison in Hohne was a big garrison. It was near the very famous Hohne ranges, Hohne Lager ranges, tank ranges, rifle ranges, and it was busy with troops. It had resident troops there who lived there on the camp. It had transiting troops, and then just down the range road was a place called Fallingbostel, which was another big garrison, and that was kind of policed by the same unit, although a detachment of the military police unit I was part of. I was in 111 Provoke Company, Royal Military Police. And turning up at my unit at 17 years old, I'm still 17 years old at this point, was an incredible eye-opener. Firstly, I had to learn not just legislation about law and taking statements and doing reports and doing interviews after caution and exhibits and continuity of exhibits and all this, which was a lot to learn, as you can appreciate. You know, I was only 17. But I also had to learn about the army, about the system of how the army works. I had to learn phrases like ACAJ and the AJ, you know, and the BOC and the BOS and the orderly dog. And I'm like, what on earth is all this? Because, of course, when you're wearing that red hat and you've got that first tape, you're meant to know your stuff. And so it was a steep learning curve. I was like this. And you'll settle into your shift. You got, you know, introduced to your shift, which was fun. And, yeah, you'd settle into your shift. It was all good fun. And then you would do your job as a policeman. Now, when I first started on shift there, we were doing 14-hour days and 10-hour nights, which is quite a day to be honest. Sorry, 10-hour days, 14-hour nights. 10-hour days, 14-hour nights. Incredible. I suppose my first real eye-opener was when I was there, and it was New Year's Eve. I was still a young lad. I think it was my first New Year's Eve there. We were doing 24-hour shifts, which was a done thing. You'd be on shift for 24 hours. I mean, looking back, that's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, a guy that was on shift with us, he wasn't a military policeman, but he was an auxiliary military policeman, which was a guy come from another cap badge. He was our Royal Horse Artillery, and he'd done a very small course, and he come and worked with us. He wore the red berry so he could carry a pistol, and he went and protected the married servicemen's quarters, married service quarters, MSQs. who would do basically anti-terrorist patrols around there. Well, one guy was on shift with us, and I got to know him fairly well. Nice lad. Remember him very, very clearly to this day. Very, very clearly. And we had our usual coffee and a chat in the brew room and that in the police station, and then we're all going out to do our respective patrols. They were going to Hanover, so they were on their way to Hanover to the Route 2, jump on the autobahn and down to Hanover. But they never made it because me and my oppo got a shout to go to them because they'd had a traffic accident and one had been killed. And I always remember the feeling I had on the way there. You know, I was still a young lad. This would be my first dead body other than seeing my gran. I'd never seen a dead person other than my gran who died peacefully. And this was on my mind on the way there. I'm with a corporal who at the time had been in 6 years. Now understand, when you're brand new and someone's been in 6 years, that seems like a lifetime, you know. I was only like 17, 18, so 6 years was quite a large chunk of my life. And he'd been in the army 6 years. And I was like, oh, he's a senior corporal, he's going to know how to deal with this. He's going to really know how to deal with this. And of course, on the way there in the car, he's driving like a maniac. He's effing and blinding. He's saying, oh, this shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened, this is 24 hours, and he's mumbling and he's going off on one. And all I'm thinking about is, Craig, you've got to hold it together. You're going to see a dead person. You need to hold it together. So he turned up at the scene, and this Land Rover, it was a long wheelbase Land Rover with a canvas back, had gone off the road. The driver had essentially fallen asleep. And it's obviously left-hand drive, so driving on the right-hand side of the road. It's gone off the road, and as it's gone off the road, it's hit a tree. As it's hit a tree, it's rocked. It's carried on going forward, and then it's hit another tree, which has upended itself and landed on top of the vehicle. And, you know, trigger warning coming up. So if you are squeamish, please scroll on. What had happened to the poor lad was he was sleeping, the passenger. He had his head on his berry on the Land Rover window. It happens. Shouldn't do it, but people do it. And he had very, very, well, catastrophic injuries to his head and his neck because he got thrown out of the side window of a Land Rover, which isn't big. The weapon rack behind him, which holds rifles, obviously on this occasion it didn't, but that caused a catastrophic injury to the back of his head. And when we turned up, he was laid out on the ground next to the Land Rover, and the German medics were there. Now, bearing in mind my oppo had been in 6 years, and this was my first less than a year. And, yeah, my oppo wasn't in a good way, to be honest. But I found myself curious, and I feel a bit guilty by saying that. I found myself curious about what had happened to this guy and how it happened. And, of course, the German medics are quite graphic. They were putting their fingers in places and explaining the cause of death. And I found myself really intrigued by what had happened and how it had happened. And I remember when I finished that shift, I went to sleep. It was on days. It was daytime. And all I could see when I closed my eyes was a picture of him in the coffee room laughing and joking. I can still see it now. And then a picture of him laying by the side of the road, or by the side of his Land Rover off the road. And it stayed with me forever. My first death as a military policeman. And what I remember is that you have to keep it together. You've got the red hat on. It's almost like an information post. Everyone looks at you to do the job. Everyone assumes you've dealt with loads of these. And so what I learned to do very quickly was not show my emotions, but inside I would be panicking, I'd be worried, and sometimes I'd be scared. But on the outside, I'd always try and look professional and maintain myself, because if I couldn't hold it together, then what hope have they got? You know, if the military police dealing with a scene can't cope, then it's just not acceptable, is it? But I just wanted to share that with you, my first death as a military policeman in Hohne. Hohne brought back around many experiences for me. It really did. You know, we were a community within a community. So we were the Royal Military Police community within a military community in Germany. And Germany was a great place to live. It really was. Got really great memories. And I had some great times, some fun times, and obviously some sad times as well. So yeah, maybe the next episode we'll talk a little bit more about Hohne and some other experiences I had in Hohne. But for now, That's it. You've just been watching Just a Veteran. Thank you very much. If you've got this far, I really do appreciate it. Please do like and follow.